Welcome to Echoes of Africa, where hidden stories, bold voices, and untold truths rise from the heart of the continent. Before you dive in, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because every echo here reveals the Africa they don't want you to see. For more than a century, undersea cables have carried the world's most valuable commodity, information. Every message, trade order, video stream, and financial transaction moves through strands of glass no thicker than a garden hose lying on the ocean floor. In 2025, a quiet transformation is taking place beneath African waters. The continent, long thought of as a consumer of global connectivity, is now becoming one of its primary arteries. With over 70 active and planned submarine cables, Africa is positioning itself not just as a digital recipient, but as a controller of data routes that link Europe, Asia, and the Americas. The modern race to wire Africa began in the early 2000s, but the turning point came between 2018 and 2025, when a new generation of high-capacity fiber systems started to land on the continent's shores. Chief among them are Google's Equiano cable and the Two Africa system backed by Meta, China Mobile, Vodafone, Orange, and other partners. Equiano stretches from Portugal down the west coast to South Africa, landing in countries such as Nigeria, Namibia, and Togo. It provides design capacity of more than 144 terabits per second, 20 times the bandwidth available before 2020. The Two Africa project, still expanding, forms the largest subsea network ever built around Africa, with 46 landing points in 33 countries and an overall capacity of roughly 180 terabits per second. Together, these systems are remapping the flow of data between continents. Africa's total international bandwidth has grown at an annual rate of over 20%, reaching nearly 1,800 terabits per second in 2025. Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, and South Africa have become regional data gateways. New routes now connect Mombasa to Karachi through the Peace Cable, built with Chinese technology, while the Africa One cable links the east and north coasts to Europe and the Middle East. Dozens of smaller national systems interconnect these landing points, feeding inland data centers in Nairobi, Lagos, Kigali, and Johannesburg. The once fragmented network is starting to function as a continental grid. Control over this infrastructure determines who manages the digital economy of the next decade. Undersea cables handle more than 95% of global data traffic, and ownership brings both economic and strategic influence. Historically, most cables landing in Africa were financed by Western telecom consortia or state-owned Asian firms. Now, African and Middle Eastern investors are entering the field. Liquid Intelligent Technologies, WIAC, and Main One, acquired by U.S. firm Equinix in 2022, represent a new generation of African operators managing both cable capacity and terrestrial fiber networks. Their involvement shifts the power balance from foreign dependence toward local control. A major vulnerability exposed this reality in March 2024, when multiple cable cuts off the West African coast disrupted internet access in 11 countries. The outage slowed digital payments, government portals, and mobile networks across the region for several days. Investigations traced the incident to seabed movements near Côte d'Ivoire that damaged 4 major cables simultaneously. The event revealed how concentrated Africa's connectivity had become, and how critical redundancy and domestic ownership were to digital sovereignty. In response, several states accelerated investments in parallel routes and local data centers to reduce reliance on a handful of international landing points. Governments have begun to treat cables as national strategic assets. Nigeria's Communications Commission introduced a cable protection zone policy requiring permits for any offshore activities near fiber routes. Kenya's Ministry of ICT established a national fiber reserve to coordinate future landing projects and prevent monopolies. South Africa, already a continental leader in data hosting, is drafting legislation to mandate local data storage for sensitive sectors such as finance and defense. These measures signal a broader shift. Africa wants not only faster connections, but also control over where its data flows and who profits from it. Private investment follows this policy momentum. Data center capacity across Africa surpassed 250 megawatts in 2025, nearly triple the figure from 2020. Lagos, Nairobi, and Johannesburg host hyperscale facilities connected directly to the new cables, allowing global cloud providers to localize services. Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, and Huawei Cloud have expanded operations, while regional firms like Africa Data Centers and Raxio Group are building new hubs in secondary markets such as Kampala, Lusaka, and Abidjan. Each new data center cluster becomes a switchboard for continental internet traffic, gradually internalizing what used to flow through Europe. The geopolitics of undersea connectivity mirror the broader struggle over technology influence. China, through companies such as Hengtong Marine and HMN Tech, continues to supply cable manufacturing and installation for projects like Peace and Pakistan East Africa interconnections. Western actors, led by Meta and Google, dominate funding for TU Africa and Equiano. Meanwhile, Middle Eastern sovereign funds from the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia have entered the sector as equity partners, seeking to turn the Red Sea into a global data crossroads. African governments are learning to balance these relationships, using open access rules to prevent exclusive control by any single bloc. The African Union recognized this dynamic in its 2024 digital transformation strategy, which emphasizes regional fiber interconnection and cybersecurity resilience. The AU Commission is working with Smart Africa Alliance to design a continental routing policy that prioritizes intra-African data exchange. At present, over 80% of African internet traffic is still routed through servers in Europe or the United States before reaching another African country. The new cable systems, combined with domestic internet exchange points, could reduce that dependency and keep more value within the continent's digital economy. The financial implications are large. Lower latency and higher bandwidth have already reduced wholesale internet prices by up to 60% in several coastal markets. In Nigeria, retail data costs dropped by a third within 2 years of Equiano's arrival. Analysts at Telegeography estimate that improved connectivity could add $20 billion annually to Africa's GDP by 2027 through new digital services, e-commerce, and remote work industries. These benefits, however, depend on stable power supply and policy coordination, areas still lagging in parts of the continent. Security remains a central concern. Submarine cables are vulnerable to both natural hazards and geopolitical interference. The March 2024 outage underscored the need for diversified routes and cable monitoring systems. Some African states are collaborating with naval authorities to map cable paths and protect them against anchor drag or sabotage. Egypt, controlling the Suez Transit Corridor for nearly a third of global data traffic, has tightened surveillance through its maritime zones. South Africa's Navy has begun coordinating with private operators to track undersea maintenance vessels near the Cape of Good Hope. The protection of digital lifelines is now part of national defense planning. A parallel shift is unfolding inland. As connectivity improves, African nations are negotiating new terms for data governance with global tech companies. Laws modeled on the EU's General Data Protection Regulation are spreading across the continent, giving citizens and regulators more authority over information stored on local servers. This legal infrastructure complements the physical one. Controlling the cables is meaningless without control over the data they carry. Countries such as Kenya and Ghana are establishing data sovereignty commissions to audit how cloud providers handle government and citizen information. The strategic consequences extend beyond Africa. Europe and Asia are increasingly dependent on African routes for redundancy as older trans-Mediterranean cables reach capacity. The TU Africa system alone will link directly to France, Italy, and Spain, offering alternative pathways that bypass traditional choke points like the Suez Corridor. This diversification enhances global network resilience, but also gives African operators leverage in future bandwidth negotiations. Analysts describe the emerging structure as a South-centric internet, one where digital flows no longer hinge exclusively on Western hubs. The transformation is also cultural. Improved connectivity fuels the growth of local content industries, fintech, and AI research. Universities and startups can now access cloud resources that were once too slow or costly. Nairobi's Silicon Savannah, Lagos's fintech sector, and Cape Town's creative tech scene all depend on stable, high-speed links to global markets. The presence of multiple undersea connections ensures competition among service providers, driving innovation and lowering entry barriers for new digital ventures. Challenges remain. Many landlocked countries still depend on cross-border fiber leases, which inflate costs. Power shortages and regulatory delays can stall construction. Environmental concerns arise over cable landings and coastal erosion. Yet the overall trend is irreversible. Africa is no longer on the periphery of the digital world. By 2030, the continent's share of global internet traffic is expected to double, and much of that growth will pass through infrastructure owned or co-managed by African entities. The undersea networks now forming a ring around the continent represent more than technology. They are instruments of economic independence. As oil once defined the geopolitics of the 20th century, data defines the 21st. The states that control data routes command influence over finance, communications, and security. Africa's growing network of cables, data centers, and regional fiber corridors is turning it from a digital colony into a digital crossroads. In the years ahead, the battle will not be over access, but over control. Who sets the terms of connectivity, who protects the cables, and who benefits from the torrents of information moving beneath the waves. For now, the evidence is clear. Africa is no longer a passive endpoint of the global internet. It is becoming one of its active architects, quietly building an undersea empire that will shape how the world connects for decades to come. You've been watching Echoes of Africa, where every story carries the sound of tomorrow. If this moved you, subscribe now, like, and share so Africa's voice never fades into silence.